during what should have been a joyful family reunion dinner with my son and his wife. After 2 years of painful silence between us, I received a mysterious text from an unknown number that would shatter my world forever. Leave now. Say nothing. You're in danger. 30 minutes later, police were breaking down their door, and what they discovered inside that mansion would haunt me for the rest of my life. Before I continue with this story that will leave you questioning everything you think you know about family loyalty, please hit that subscribe button. Your support means everything to me as I share the most difficult chapter of my life. And drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Knowing I'm not alone in this makes all the difference. The autumn rain drummed against my kitchen window like restless fingers, each drop echoing the emptiness that had consumed my Brooklyn brownstone for the past 18 months. I stood at the sink, methodically washing Evelyn's favorite ceramic mug, the one with tiny painted violets that she'd bought at that little antique shop in Vermont during our last anniversary trip. The same mug I'd washed every single evening since her funeral, as if maintaining this ritual could somehow keep her memory from fading. My hands, weathered from 6 decades of hard work, trembled slightly as I dried the delicate porcelain. Evelyn had always teased me about being too rough with the dishes. "Gentle, Nathaniel," she'd say, her soft southern accent turning my name into music. "These pieces have stories to tell, and they deserve our respect." The kitchen felt cavernous without her presence. No humming of old jazz standards while she prepared elaborate Sunday dinners. No gentle scolding about leaving the newspaper scattered across our small breakfast table. No warm laughter filling the spaces between our comfortable silences. Just the relentless tick of the wall clock marking another solitary evening in what used to be our sanctuary. I placed the mug in the dish rack where it always belonged, creating a small shrine to better times. The refrigerator door was covered with faded photographs held by mismatched magnets, memories from when our family still existed as something whole and beautiful. My eyes found the picture of Caleb at his college graduation, 22 years old and grinning with that infectious smile that had once been the center of my universe. Evelyn's arm was wrapped around his shoulders, both of them radiating the kind of joy that seemed impossible now. That was before the arguments, before the money, before the devastating silence that had stretched between us like an uncrossable canyon. The shrill ring of the telephone cut through my melancholy like a blade. My wet hands fumbled for the dish towel as the phone continued its insistent demand. The wall-mounted receiver felt cold against my palm as I lifted it, squinting at the caller ID display through my reading glasses. The number displayed made my breath catch in my throat. Caleb. For a moment I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. 2 years of deafening silence stretched between us like an ocean of hurt and stubborn pride. The last time we'd spoken, he'd stormed out of this very kitchen after I'd refused to give him money for what he'd called the investment opportunity of a lifetime. Evelyn would have handled it differently. She always knew exactly what to say, how to bridge the gap between my practical caution and his ambitious dreams. "Hello?" My voice came out rougher than I'd intended, gravelly from a day spent mostly in silence. "Dad?" Caleb's voice carried that same uncertain tone I remembered from his childhood, the way he'd sound when he'd broken something valuable and wasn't sure how much trouble he was in. It's me." I gripped the phone tighter, my heart hammering against my ribs like a caged bird desperate for freedom. "Caleb, I wasn't expecting—" I know it's been—" He paused and I could hear him breathing, gathering courage. "Too long. Way too long, Dad." I moved slowly to my armchair, the worn leather recliner that Evelyn had insisted we buy because it supported my aching back properly. The leather was worn smooth from years of evening news and Sunday crossword puzzles, molded to the shape of my body like an old friend. "How are you, son?" The words came out softer than I'd planned, carrying more longing than I'd intended to reveal. "I'm good, really good, Dad. Veronica and we've been talking, and we realized how much we miss having you around, how much we miss—" He struggled with the word, family. Family. The word hung in the air between us, heavy with memory and possibility. We'd been that once, a real family. before pride and money and stubborn silence built walls between us that seemed impossible to tear down. I miss it too, I admitted, surprised by the honesty in my own voice. The confession felt like stepping off a cliff. Dad, would you consider coming for dinner tonight? Veronica's making that beef bourguignon you always loved, and we could talk. Really talk like we used to. I stared at the family photo on my side table. Caleb, Veronica, Evelyn, and me at their wedding 6 years ago, before everything went wrong. Before the investments failed, and the desperation set in. Before my son looked at me and saw nothing but a source of money rather than a father who loved him unconditionally. Evelyn always said, "Families find their way back to each other, Nathaniel. It just takes time and forgiveness on both sides." Tonight? The surprise in my voice was unmistakable. I know it's short notice, but Veronica's already started cooking and we don't want to wait anymore, Dad. We've wasted enough time. Something in his voice tugged at my heart, a vulnerability I remembered from when he was small and afraid of thunderstorms, when he'd crawl into our bed seeking comfort from the chaos of the world outside. Maybe Evelyn had been right. Maybe families really could heal if given the chance. What time? I heard myself asking. 7:30. I'll text you the address. We moved to Westchester last year. Got a place in Scarsdale. Scarsdale. My mind processed this information with growing confusion. Scarsdale was expensive territory, home to hedge fund managers and corporate executives, the kind of place that required serious money. Money my son hadn't had the last time we'd spoken. "I'll be there, son." The words came out before I could second-guess them. "Dad?" His voice softened with something that might have been relief. "Thank you. Thank you for giving us another chance." After I hung up, I sat in the gathering darkness, holding the family photo in my trembling hands. Evelyn smiled up at me from the frame, and I could almost hear her whisper, "It's time, Nathaniel. It's time to come home." The silence that followed felt different somehow, charged with possibility instead of emptiness. I set the family photo carefully back on the side table and rose from my chair with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt in months. Tonight would be different. Tonight I might have my son back. Upstairs, my bedroom felt like a museum of memories frozen in time. Evelyn's jewelry box still sat on her dresser, dust motes dancing in the late afternoon light that streamed through the lace curtains she'd sewn herself. Her perfume bottles, Chanel No. 5 and that lavender scent she'd worn on quiet Sunday mornings, stood like sentinels guarding against the intrusion of change. I opened my closet and pushed past everyday flannel shirts and worn cardigans until my fingers found the navy suit hanging in protective plastic. The fabric felt substantial between my fingers, a wool blend that Evelyn had insisted on when she'd surprised me with it for Caleb's college graduation. "You need something distinguished for important occasions," she'd said, smoothing the lapels with her careful hands, her eyes bright with pride. "And our son graduating summa cum laude is definitely an important occasion." I carried the suit to the bed and unwrapped it slowly, remembering how proud I'd felt walking into that auditorium with Evelyn on my arm, watching Caleb cross the stage to accept his degree in finance. The same suit had seen me through job interviews, anniversary dinners, and Evelyn's funeral. Tonight it would witness what I hoped would be another milestone, the resurrection of my family. The shower's hot water loosened muscles I hadn't realized I'd been tensing for months. As I shaved, I caught my reflection studying me with hopeful but cautious eyes. When had I gotten so old? The lines around my eyes had deepened into canyons, and silver now dominated what had once been thick brown hair. Would Caleb notice how the loneliness had aged me? Would Veronica see how hollow I'd become without family to anchor me? Evelyn's cologne sat on the bathroom counter, where I'd left it, after her passing, untouched, for 18 months. Some memories were too precious to disturb, too sacred to borrow from, even in desperation. Dressed and ready, I surveyed my reflection one final time. The suit still fit well, though perhaps a bit looser than before. Grief had stolen my appetite along with my joy. I selected a bottle of aged scotch from the cabinet, a peace offering, something to bridge the gap between past hurts and future hopes. The bottle had been a gift from Caleb 3 Christmases ago, during happier times when gift-giving hadn't felt like a transaction. My phone buzzed with Caleb's text. 428 Maple Ridge Drive, Scarsdale. Can't wait to see you, Dad. The heart emoji caught me off guard. When had my son started using emojis? It seemed like such a small thing, but it felt like evidence of a softer side I hadn't seen in years. I called for an Uber, my fingers hesitating over the keyboard as I typed the address. Scarsdale was over an hour away from my modest Brooklyn neighborhood, another world entirely. The app showed a wait time of 12 minutes, long enough for second thoughts to creep in. Standing by my front window, I watched familiar brownstones blur into evening shadows. Mrs. Patterson from next door waved from her stoop, walking her ancient dachshund who moved about as slowly as she did. I waved back, feeling lighter than I had in months. Maybe tonight would change everything. Maybe family really could find its way home. The Uber arrived precisely on time, an immaculate black sedan driven by a soft-spoken man named Hassan, who commented on the unseasonably warm weather for October. As we pulled away from the curb and Brooklyn gave way to highways, and highways gave way to manicured suburbs, I watched the world transform outside my window. Houses grew larger and more elaborate with each mile. Modest two-story homes became sprawling estates. Chain-link fences gave way to stone walls and ornate iron gates. By the time we crossed into Westchester County, I was staring at mansions that could have housed entire city blocks worth of Brooklyn families. Scarsdale's a beautiful area, Hassan remarked, noting my wide-eyed observation of the transformation. Lot of very successful people out here. I'm visiting my son, I replied, pride swelling in my chest despite my growing confusion about how Caleb could afford such luxury. Family dinner. Lucky man having family in a place like this, Hassan said with genuine warmth. Lucky indeed, I thought, though unease began to creep into my excitement like shadows at sunset. How exactly had Caleb managed to buy a house in one of New York's most expensive zip codes? The last time we'd spoken, he'd been desperate for money to invest in what he'd called cryptocurrency opportunities and emerging market funds. None of his explanations had made sense to me then, and this mansion seemed to make even less sense now. The GPS announced our arrival at 428 Maple Ridge Drive, and Hassan slowed to a stop before a house that belonged in architectural magazines. I sat frozen in the back seat, staring up at limestone columns and perfectly sculpted topiaries that probably cost more than my yearly mortgage payments. A circular driveway curved around an ornate fountain where water danced in the early evening light like liquid diamonds. 2 luxury vehicles, a gleaming Mercedes S-Class and a pristine BMW X7, sat parked like monuments to prosperity. This is it, sir, Hassan announced with obvious admiration. Absolutely gorgeous place. I fumbled with my wallet, hands trembling slightly as I counted out bills, and added what I hoped was an appropriate tip. Thank you. Have a wonderful evening. The car door felt heavier than it should have as I stepped onto pavement so pristine it might have been installed that morning. My shoes, polished but obviously worn, clicked against stone as I walked the curved path toward an entrance that could have belonged to a 5-star hotel. Motion sensor lights illuminated my approach with theatrical precision, making me feel like an actor entering a stage I hadn't auditioned for. Before I could even reach for the brass doorbell, the massive oak door swung open. A middle-aged Latina woman with kind eyes and graying hair pulled back in an elegant bun stood in the doorway, wearing a crisp black uniform that spoke of professional domestic service. Her smile seemed genuine, but something flickered behind her eyes. Concern? Warning? The expression vanished so quickly I wondered if I'd imagined it. Mr. Miller, she said warmly, stepping aside to usher me into a foyer that made my entire living room look like a walk-in closet. I'm Carmen. Mr. Caleb and Miss Veronica are so excited you're here. The interior took my breath away. Marble floors stretched toward a curved staircase that belonged in movies about European royalty. Crystal chandeliers cast warm light over oil paintings that looked original and expensive, not the kind of reproductions you'd find at furniture stores. Fresh flowers, real ones, not the silk arrangements I favored for easy maintenance, filled the air with subtle perfume that suggested money was no object. "Dad!" Caleb's voice boomed from somewhere deeper in the house, his footsteps echoing as he approached. He appeared in the foyer looking like he'd stepped out of a men's fashion magazine. Expensive charcoal suit, perfect haircut, teeth that definitely hadn't been that white during his college years. When he reached me, his embrace felt desperate, lasting several beats too long, as if he were trying to squeeze 2 years of separation into a single hug. "You look incredible," he said, stepping back to study me with eyes that seemed both grateful and strangely anxious. "Really incredible, Dad." Veronica materialized beside him like a graceful spirit in a silk dress that probably cost more than my monthly Social Security check. Her makeup was flawless, her jewelry subtle but clearly expensive, her smile so perfect, it seemed almost practiced. Everything about her screamed expensive polish, the kind that came with serious money. "Nathaniel," she swept forward to kiss my cheek, enveloping me in perfume that probably cost more per ounce than I spent on groceries in a week. "You look wonderful. We're so happy you're here." I managed what I hoped was an appropriately appreciative smile, still overwhelmed by the sheer opulence surrounding us. "This place is absolutely incredible. When did you—" "Real estate," Caleb interrupted quickly, his laugh a little too bright, a little too forced. "Caught the market at exactly the right time. Lucky timing, mostly." Something about his tone made me pause. The Caleb I knew had never been lucky with money. Quite the opposite, in fact. Every investment he'd ever made seemed to go wrong. Every sure thing had turned into another financial disaster. But Emma was already taking my arm with practiced grace, steering me away from uncomfortable questions. "Come, let's get you settled," she said smoothly. "Carmen, could you take Mr. Miller's coat?" I handed over my jacket, my best one, though it suddenly felt shabby in these surroundings. Carmen accepted it with another of those kind but troubled smiles, disappearing toward what I assumed was a coat closet large enough to house a small apartment. "I brought this," I said, offering the Scotch bottle I'd selected so carefully. "Thought we could share a drink before dinner." Caleb's face lit up as he examined the label. "Dad, this is fantastic. You really shouldn't have, but I'm so glad you did." He clapped my shoulder with enthusiasm that felt slightly forced, like an actor who'd been coached on how to show familial affection. "Veronica's been cooking all afternoon," he continued, guiding me toward what I assumed was the living room. "She remembered how much you love beef bourguignon." How did Veronica remember my food preferences? We'd shared perhaps 5 meals together in 6 years of marriage to my son, and I couldn't recall beef bourguignon being a topic of conversation during any of them. But her smile was so warm, so welcoming that I pushed the thought aside. Maybe she'd asked Caleb, or maybe she'd simply guessed correctly. "You're too kind," I told her, meaning it despite my confusion. "Family takes care of family," she replied smoothly, linking her arm through mine. "That's what matters most, isn't it?" As Caleb led us through rooms that belonged in interior design magazines, I tried to reconcile this obvious wealth with the son who'd asked me for money just 2 years ago. The living room alone could have housed 3 families comfortably. Soaring ceilings, furniture that looked custom-made, artwork that suggested serious collecting rather than casual decoration. Carmen had vanished somewhere into the house's depths, leaving us in this perfect tableau of family reunion. But as we walked through spaces that screamed expensive success, I couldn't shake the feeling that I was missing something important. The Caleb I knew had never been this successful, this polished, this financially secure. Something didn't add up, but his smile was so genuine, so full of hope, that I decided to trust in the possibility of second chances. Maybe Evelyn's faith in family reconciliation was about to be proven right. The dining room opened before us like a scene from a period drama about old money and refined taste. A mahogany table that could have seated 12 people comfortably was set for an intimate dinner for 3, each place setting a masterpiece of formal dining. Bone china so delicate it seemed translucent, caught the light from an overhead chandelier, that probably cost more than my car. Crystal glasses stood at attention like soldiers, and silverware gleamed against pristine white linens that looked like they'd been pressed by professional hands. "This is absolutely breathtaking," I breathed, genuinely awed by the display. Veronica beamed at the compliment, her smile radiant with what seemed like genuine pride. "We wanted tonight to be special, Nathaniel. We wanted to show you how much this reconciliation means to us." Caleb pulled out my chair at the head of the table with the practiced ease of someone accustomed to formal entertaining. The gesture felt significant, placing me in the position of honor, the patriarch being welcomed back to his rightful place. As I settled into the chair, I noticed how both Caleb and Veronica positioned themselves within easy conversation distance, their placement seeming carefully choreographed. Carmen appeared silently from what I assumed was the kitchen, carrying delicate appetizers arranged like tiny works of art on expensive china. Each canapé looked like it belonged in a five-star restaurant rather than a family dinner: smoked salmon on cucumber rounds, duck liver pâté on toast points, shrimp cocktail presented with professional flair. "Let's start with your scotch," Caleb announced, already opening the bottle I'd brought. The amber liquid caught the chandelier's light as he poured generous portions into heavy crystal tumblers that felt substantial in my hands. "This calls for a proper toast." He handed me a glass filled higher than I would have poured for myself, probably twice what I'd typically drink with dinner. Veronica raised her wine glass with theatrical grace, her movements so practiced they seemed almost rehearsed. "To family," she said, her smile brilliant enough to light the chandelier. "To forgiveness and fresh starts." "To Evelyn," Caleb added, his voice catching slightly with what seemed like genuine emotion. "She would have wanted us together like this." The scotch burned sweetly as we drank, spreading warmth through my chest. Evelyn always said alcohol loosened tongues and hearts in equal measure, and tonight I found myself hoping she was right. Surrounded by such obvious prosperity and genuine-seeming warmth, I began to believe that reconciliation really was possible. "Tell us about the restaurants." Veronica leaned forward with what appeared to be sincere interest. "Caleb says you've built an empire from practically nothing." "Empire is too grand a word." I took another sip, feeling unusually relaxed for someone in an unfamiliar environment. "Just hard work and treating people right. Evelyn always said, treat employees like family, customers like friends." "Don't be modest, Dad." Caleb refilled my glass before I noticed it had emptied. 6 locations now. That's impressive by any standard." 6 locations. He'd been keeping track, even during our 2 years of silence. Something warm expanded in my chest. Maybe he'd cared more than I'd realized. Maybe the separation had hurt him as much as it had hurt me. Carmen served the soup course with practiced efficiency, though I noticed her hands trembling slightly as she placed the bowl before me. Rich lobster bisque and delicate porcelain, another reminder of how far we'd traveled from my modest Brooklyn kitchen and simple dinner routines. "Do you ever think about retirement?" Veronica asked casually, cutting her bread with surgical precision. "Slowing down, maybe enjoying the fruits of all that hard work?" "The restaurants keep me busy," I replied, finding myself drinking more freely than usual. The combination of excellent scotch, good company, and the relief of reconciliation was loosening inhibitions I'd maintained for months. It's what Evelyn and I built together. Every location has her fingerprints on it somehow. Caleb and Veronica exchanged a glance. Subtle, but I caught it. They seemed to communicate without words the way couples do after years of marriage and shared secrets. Something passed between them, some understanding I wasn't privy to. "But you can't work forever." Caleb pressed gently, his tone carefully casual. "Have you thought about succession planning? Legal arrangements for the future? Making sure everything's properly documented?" The question felt oddly specific for casual dinner conversation, but the alcohol was making everything seem harmless and warm. Maybe he was genuinely concerned about my future, about ensuring I'd be taken care of in my later years. "One day at a time, son," I replied, taking another generous sip. "One day at a time." Carmen appeared with the main course, beef bourguignon that smelled exactly like Evelyn's recipe. The aroma triggered memories so vivid I could almost hear my wife humming in our little Brooklyn kitchen, could almost see her checking the pot one more time to ensure the seasoning was perfect. "This is incredible," I told Veronica truthfully, taking my first bite. The flavors were perfect, rich, complex, exactly like Evelyn used to make. Exactly like my wife's recipe. "How did you—" Veronica's smile looked slightly painted on, less natural than before. "I wanted tonight to be special, Nathaniel, to remind you that family takes care of family." As we ate, Caleb regaled me with stories about his real estate ventures, though his explanations remained frustratingly vague. He spoke of market timing and strategic investments, without providing concrete details about properties or locations. Veronica asked increasingly pointed questions about restaurant operations, profit margins, property values, business structure, legal ownership details. Their curiosity felt intense, almost professional, like they were conducting some kind of informal business assessment rather than catching up with family. But the scotch made thinking difficult, and the warmth of reconciliation overshadowed any concerns. The room grew noticeably warmer as the evening progressed, though it might have been the alcohol affecting my perception. My head felt lighter than it should have after just 2 glasses of scotch, even good scotch consumed with rich food. I'd always been able to handle my alcohol reasonably well, but tonight everything felt slightly surreal, like I was watching myself from outside my body. Caleb checked his watch when he thought I wasn't looking, a quick, nervous gesture that didn't match the relaxed family atmosphere we'd been cultivating. Veronica monitored my scotch consumption like a bartender tracking a regular customer's intake, ensuring my glass never stayed empty for long. Carmen moved between kitchen and dining room with what seemed like nervous efficiency, at one point dropping a serving fork that clattered against the marble floor with startling loudness. She apologized profusely, but her hands were definitely shaking now. Something nagged at the edge of my consciousness, some detail that didn't quite fit the perfect family reunion narrative. But the scotch made coherent thought difficult, and I found myself floating on a cloud of warm reconciliation and genuine seeming affection from my son and daughter-in-law. "The Crown Heights location," I found myself saying, though I couldn't remember starting that sentence. Opening went better than expected. Evelyn would have been so proud of how the community welcomed us. I reached into my jacket pocket for my phone, intending to show them photos from the restaurant's opening celebration. The device vibrated against my palm just as I started to pull it out, startling me mid-sentence. "Sorry," I mumbled, glancing apologetically at Caleb and Veronica. Probably just the night manager with some routine question. But the number on my screen belonged to no one I recognized. A local area code, but completely unfamiliar digits. I frowned, my scotch-clouded mind struggling to process this anomaly. Restaurant emergencies came from familiar numbers: Miguel from the Park Slope location, Sarah from the Bed-Stuy spot, Tony from our newest Crown Heights venture. The phone buzzed again, more insistently this time, demanding my attention with increasing urgency. "Everything all right?" Caleb asked, leaning forward with what seemed like excessive concern for a simple phone call. "Just an unfamiliar number," I replied, shielding the screen partially with my napkin, driven by an instinct I couldn't explain. Something about their focused attention on my phone made me defensive, though I couldn't articulate why. I opened the text message, expecting spam or a wrong number. Instead, stark capital letters appeared on my screen like a punch to the gut. "Stand up and leave now. Say nothing to your son. You are in immediate danger." My blood turned to ice water. The elegant dining room suddenly felt like it was tilting, though I couldn't tell if that was shock or the scotch making my head swim. I read the message again, certain I'd misunderstood. Praying I'd misunderstood. Same words. Same urgent command. Same terrifying implication that the people I was sharing dinner with posed some kind of threat. "Dad?" Veronica's voice seemed to come from very far away, though she was sitting just inches to my left. You look pale. Are you feeling all right? I forced my features into what I hoped resembled normalcy, slipping the phone back into my pocket with hands that trembled more than they should have. Fine. Just rich food hitting me harder than expected. But I wasn't fine. Someone unknown had my private number, knew where I was, knew who I was with, and felt compelled to warn me about what? About Caleb? About this perfect evening that suddenly felt like an elaborate stage production designed to deceive me. The scotch glass in my hand caught the chandelier light, amber liquid swirling as my fingers shook imperceptibly. When had I become this dizzy? 3 glasses shouldn't affect me this strongly, not with such a substantial meal. I'd always been able to handle alcohol reasonably well. Maybe some water, Veronica suggested smoothly, already signaling to Carmen, who appeared immediately, as if she'd been waiting for exactly this cue. Caleb studied my face with sharp attention that felt suddenly predatory rather than concerned. You sure you're okay? You went completely white there for a second. I'm sure. The lie came easier than it should have, sliding out before I could examine its accuracy. Just need to... Excuse me for a moment. Bathroom? Caleb pointed toward the hallway, his helpfulness feeling strangely rehearsed. Of course. Second door on the left, Veronica added with practiced precision. We'll wait for you. Carmen's bringing dessert soon. I stood carefully, testing my balance against the chair back. The room swayed slightly, but I managed to walk with what I hoped appeared normal toward the hallway. Behind me, Caleb and Veronica's voices continued in low, urgent tones that stopped the moment they thought I was out of earshot. The hallway stretched before me, lined with expensive artwork and subtle lighting that probably cost more than most people's annual salaries. Second door on the left led to what I assumed was a powder room, but instead of turning left, something made me continue straight toward what looked like a kitchen entrance. The anonymous message burned in my memory like a brand. Whoever sent it knew something I didn't, something that made them feel I was in enough danger to risk exposing themselves by warning a complete stranger. That kind of risk suggested the threat was real and immediate. Carmen stood at an enormous commercial-grade sink, washing crystal glasses with methodical precision. Her back was turned toward me, but she didn't acknowledge my presence even though my footsteps must have been audible on the marble floors. She continued her work as if I were completely invisible, which seemed odd for someone who'd been so attentive during dinner. The kitchen's back door stood just beyond her, leading to what looked like a carefully manicured garden. Freedom. Fresh air. Space to think clearly away from Caleb and Veronica's increasingly watchful eyes. I moved as quietly as possible past Carmen, expecting her to turn to question my presence to alert my host to my unconventional route through their home. She never looked up from her washing, though I noticed her shoulders tense slightly as I passed, as if she were deliberately avoiding acknowledging what she was witnessing. The door opened silently onto a lawn that could have belonged to a country club. Perfectly trimmed grass, strategically placed lighting, landscaping that spoke of serious money and professional maintenance. Motion sensors illuminated my path across the pristine yard toward a gate in the property's back fence. My phone felt heavy in my pocket, carrying its mysterious warning like evidence of a conspiracy I couldn't yet understand. Street lamps beyond the fence promised anonymity, distance from whatever danger had prompted that urgent message. I walked faster, my dress shoes slipping slightly on dewy grass, not caring about stains or appearances anymore. The evening had shifted from joyful reunion to something that felt increasingly like a trap, though I still couldn't identify exactly what kind of trap or why anyone would want to harm me. The gate opened onto a quiet residential street lined with mansions that probably housed millionaires and their carefully guarded secrets. I pulled out my phone with trembling fingers, opened my ride-sharing app, and requested pickup 2 blocks away from Caleb's address. 6 minutes until arrival. 6 minutes to decide whether I was being paranoid or protecting myself from something real and dangerous. The phone in my hand felt like evidence of either conspiracy or mental breakdown. I couldn't tell which. But that message, those urgent capital letters, had triggered every survival instinct Evelyn's practical wisdom had ever taught me. When someone warns you about danger, she'd always said, listen first and ask questions later. Pride can be repaired. Lives can't be. The Uber's headlights appeared at the end of the block like salvation, cutting through suburban darkness with a promise of escape. I climbed into the back seat, gave the driver my Brooklyn address, and immediately called the number that had shattered my evening with its terrifying warning. It rang twice before a voice answered, careful, anonymous, deliberately neutral, in a way that suggested this person had experience with dangerous conversations. I hoped you would call this number, the voice said without preamble. Who is this? My voice came out rougher than intended, strained by fear and confusion. Why did you warn me? I cannot reveal my identity, but you were in immediate danger tonight. The speaker's accent suggested education, someone comfortable with English but not native born. That danger has not passed. That's impossible, I insisted, though my conviction was already cracking. I was having dinner with my son and his wife, a family reunion. A pause that stretched too long, filled with the sound of traffic and my own labored breathing. Then, your son owes $3.2 million to people who break bones when payment is late. The deadline for repayment is 8 days from tonight. The Uber driver glanced in his rearview mirror as we merged into traffic, probably wondering why his passenger had gone completely silent mid-conversation. I gripped the phone tighter, the anonymous caller's words echoing in my head like hammer blows against glass. That's impossible, I repeated, though my voice lacked any conviction now. Caleb owns real estate. He lives in a mansion worth millions, borrowed against everything to fund gambling debts, the voice continued relentlessly. Underground casinos, high-stakes poker, sports betting with organized loan sharks, the house, the cars, the lifestyle, all purchased with money he doesn't have. My free hand found the door handle instinctively, as if I could escape this information by fleeing the moving vehicle. Through the window, expensive Westchester neighborhoods blurred past, perfect lawns and elegant homes hiding imperfect secrets and desperate lies. Even if that were true, I said slowly, my mind struggling through scotch-induced fog to process these revelations. What does it have to do with warning me away from dinner? The scotch you brought contained GHB mixed with a potent sedative called Rohypnol, the voice replied with clinical precision. The combination multiplies alcohol's effects by a factor of 6, making you extremely susceptible to suggestion while creating memory gaps that would make it difficult to recall signing documents. The words hit like physical blows, the unusual dizziness after just 3 glasses, the way my thinking had become increasingly clouded, my growing willingness to discuss business details I'd normally keep private even with family. Legal documents were prepared in advance, the voice continued with devastating calm. Complete transfer of your restaurant properties and business assets. Power of attorney granting your son full control of everything you've built. The only missing element was your signature, which they planned to obtain while you were incapacitated. The Uber driver kept his eyes professionally on the road, ignoring his passenger's obvious distress with the practiced discretion of someone who'd seen too much human drama unfold in his back seat. I stared out at suburban streets that looked suddenly sinister, every well-lit window potentially concealing similar betrayals. How do you know all this? I managed to whisper. That doesn't matter right now. What matters is that you escaped before signing anything. The drug combination they use can cause complete memory blackouts, making it easy for them to claim you willingly transferred everything during a lucid conversation. I thought about Caleb's nervous energy throughout dinner, Veronica's rehearsed warmth and pointed questions about succession planning. The evening replayed in my memory with horrifying new context. Every toast designed to increase my consumption. Every refilled glass a step closer to complete vulnerability. Every strategic touch calculated to lower my guard. My son wouldn't. But the protest died in my throat. The boy who'd once asked me to read him bedtime stories had grown into a man desperate enough to drug his own father for money. The loan sharks gave him 2 weeks to produce the full amount, the anonymous caller continued. That deadline is now 8 days away. After that, they move from financial pressure to physical consequences. "Why are you helping me?" I asked finally, my voice barely audible above the road noise. "Because what they planned was morally reprehensible. Because you deserve to know the truth about people you trust. Because someone needs to speak for justice when family bonds are perverted into weapons." The caller clearly had intimate access to Caleb and Veronica's conspiracy. Debt amounts, specific drugs, document details that no outsider should possess. My mind raced through possibilities. "Carmen?" The realization hit me like lightning striking clear sky. A long pause. Then quietly, "I see more than people realize. I hear conversations they think I can't understand. I watch families destroy themselves with greed and desperation. Carmen." The housekeeper who'd served dinner with nervous efficiency, who'd avoided eye contact, who'd deliberately ignored my unconventional exit through her kitchen. She'd known about the plan and chosen conscience over employment security, moral courage over personal safety. "Thank you," I said quietly, meaning it more than any words I'd ever spoken. "Don't thank me yet. They'll realize you're gone soon. And when they do, panic will make them dangerous. Caleb is desperate enough to try again, possibly with more violent methods." The Uber continued toward Brooklyn, each mile increasing the distance between me and the son I thought I knew. My phone showed 7 missed calls from Caleb's number, probably wondering what was taking so long in the bathroom, growing increasingly frantic as minutes stretched into obvious absence. "What should I do?" I asked. "Protect yourself immediately. Change locks on all properties. Inform your lawyers and accountants about the situation. Move financial assets to accounts Caleb can't access. He knows your business inside and out. Every routine, every vulnerability, every person you trust." The weight of complete family destruction settled on my shoulders like lead. In one evening, I'd gained a son and lost him again, learned the price of trust, and discovered the depths of desperation that money could create. "Will you testify if this goes to court?" I asked. "I cannot risk deportation, but the truth has ways of surfacing when people dig deep enough. The drugs will show up in blood tests if you act quickly. The documents exist. They'll be hidden, but not destroyed." 3 more missed calls appeared on my screen. Caleb's panic would be escalating as bathroom minutes stretched into obvious flight. Soon he'd realize I'd left deliberately, and desperation would make him capable of almost anything. "Be very careful," Carmen's voice warned through the phone. "Desperate people make desperate choices. Your son has 8 days to find $3.2 million or face consequences worse than bankruptcy. That kind of pressure can turn family members into enemies." The call ended, leaving me alone with the driver's soft jazz and the weight of complete betrayal. In 3 hours, I'd gone from lonely widower to joyful father, to potential victim of an elaborate family conspiracy. My phone buzzed with a text from Caleb. "Dad, where are you? We're worried sick. Please call us." I stared at the message, then deleted it without responding. The man who'd sent those words had planned to drug me unconscious and steal everything Evelyn and I had spent 40 years building together. "Sir, we're approaching the Brooklyn Bridge," the Uber driver said gently. "Still want to go to the original address?" I looked out at the city lights reflecting off dark water, then back at my phone showing recent calls from Caleb's number. Safety lay ahead in Brooklyn, in my familiar brownstone where Evelyn's memory lived in every corner. But running felt like cowardice now, knowing what desperate people might do to other innocent victims. I pulled Evelyn's wedding photo from my wallet, edges soft from years of handling, her smile as radiant as the day we'd promised to build something meaningful together. She'd never backed down from difficult conversations, never chosen comfort over doing what was right. She wouldn't run, I whispered to her image, drawing strength from memory. The driver caught my eye in the rearview mirror. "Everything all right back there, sir?" "Actually, no." I straightened in my seat, decision crystallizing like steel in my chest. "I need to make a phone call first. Then we're changing destinations." My fingers shook as I dialed 911, but my voice was steady when the dispatcher answered. Emergency services. What's your emergency? My family attempted to poison me for money tonight. I have evidence, and they're still at the location with prepared legal documents to steal my business assets. The dispatcher's questions came rapid fire. Nature of the poisoning, number of suspects, weapons present, my current location and safety status. I answered methodically, my business training taking over. Clear facts, specific details, actionable information that would help law enforcement respond effectively. Officers are en route to the Scarsdale address you provided, the dispatcher confirmed. Estimated arrival time is 22 minutes. Sir, I strongly advise you not to return to that location until officers have secured the scene. I looked at Evelyn's photo again, her eyes holding that expression she'd worn when I needed to be braver than I felt naturally inclined to be. I understand the risk, but if I don't go back, they'll destroy evidence and potentially try this again with someone else. My son is desperate enough to drug his own father. He won't hesitate to harm strangers if he thinks it will solve his problems. After disconnecting, I leaned forward toward the driver. Change of plans. We're going back to Westchester. Sir, you seem really upset about something. Maybe you should think about this decision when you're calmer. This isn't a rash choice. I met his eyes in the mirror, seeing my own determination reflected back. Sometimes you have to choose between being safe and doing what's right. Tonight, I'm choosing right. The return journey felt different from our earlier drive. Streetlights illuminated resolve instead of confusion, purpose instead of naive hope. Each mile brought me closer to confronting the son I'd raised, the family I'd trusted, the future I'd have to rebuild from absolute zero. Evelyn's voice seemed to whisper from the photograph. Family means telling the truth, especially when it hurts everyone involved. 25 minutes later, we turned onto Maple Ridge Drive just as 3 unmarked police vehicles approached from the opposite direction. My heart hammered against my ribs as reality crystallized. This was actually happening. I was about to destroy my family to save myself and potentially protect others from similar betrayal. Wait around the corner, I told the driver. This might take several hours. Walking up that curved driveway felt like approaching my own execution. The mansion's perfect exterior concealed such calculated evil, such desperate betrayal dressed in elegant clothes and expensive taste. My hand trembled as I reached for the doorbell, knowing that everything would change the moment I pressed it. Time to face my son. Time to choose justice over family loyalty. The doorbell's melodic chimes echoed through the mansion like funeral bells. Footsteps approached quickly, too quickly for casual concern, too urgent for normal hospitality. Caleb yanked the door open with desperate force, relief and suspicion warring across his features like competing emotions in a badly acted play. "Dad, where have you been?" His smile looked painted on with theatrical makeup. "We were getting worried sick about you." "Sorry, son." I forced my voice into apologetic tones, though every word felt like swallowing glass. I needed some fresh air after dinner, felt dizzy from all that rich food and excellent scotch. Dizzy? His eyes sharpened with predatory focus. "You were gone for almost an hour, Dad. Veronica thought something terrible had happened. Time got away from me. Beautiful neighborhood you have here. I walked much further than I intended." I stepped back into the foyer, noting how every expensive detail now felt like evidence of criminal activity, rather than legitimate success. Veronica appeared behind Caleb, her designer dress wrinkled from nervous pacing, her perfect hostess mask slipping to reveal raw panic underneath. Her makeup had smudged slightly around her eyes. She'd been crying, or very close to it. "Nathaniel, you gave us such a scare," she said, reaching for my arm with fingers that trembled visibly. "Are you feeling better now? Should we call a doctor?" "Much better, thank you." I allowed her to guide me back inside, noting how her grip lingered too long, too tight, like someone trying to prevent escape rather than offer comfort. Just needed to clear my head. The foyer felt smaller now, oppressive rather than impressive. Every expensive detail reminded me of the blood money that had purchased this illusion of prosperity. Money borrowed against a future that would never exist. Money that would ultimately cost me everything I'd worked to build. Perhaps you had too much wine with dinner. Veronica's laugh sounded brittle, like crystal about to shatter. Let's get you some water and maybe you should sit down. Actually, I think I'd like to return to the dining room if that's all right. I moved deliberately toward the scene of their planned crime. I feel like we barely got to finish our conversation. Caleb and Veronica exchanged a glance heavy with meaning I was supposed to miss, panic, desperation, and quick calculation all flickering between them in a second of unguarded communication. Of course, Dad. Whatever you need, Caleb replied, but his voice carried an undertone of barely controlled hysteria. The dining room had been hastily reorganized during my absence. Papers that might have been scattered across the table were nowhere to be seen. The crystal glasses had been cleared and replaced with fresh ones. Carmen moved efficiently between kitchen and dining room, her nervous energy more pronounced than before, like someone who knew exactly what was coming. I settled back into my chair at the head of the table, noting how Caleb and Veronica flanked me exactly as before, but now their positioning felt like confinement rather than family intimacy. I hope you don't mind, Veronica said with forced casualness. But we cleaned up a bit while you were getting air. Didn't want to leave Carmen with too much work so late in the evening. Very considerate. I smiled blandly, wondering what evidence they'd hidden or destroyed during my strategic absence. Caleb drummed his fingers against the mahogany table, a nervous habit from childhood that betrayed his anxiety now, the same gesture he'd made before confessing to broken windows or failed tests. So, Dad, feeling completely recovered? No more dizziness or confusion? The question carried undertones I pretended not to hear, but his desperation was showing through his careful performance. Clear as a bell, son. That fresh air worked wonders. Veronica leaned forward with calculated concern, her smile not quite reaching her eyes. You know, rich meals can affect people differently as we get older. Perhaps next time we should plan something lighter. Next time. As if there would be one after tonight. As if we'd continue this charade of family dinners when they'd plan to rob me of everything. I've always had a strong constitution, I replied evenly. Takes more than good food and wine to slow me down. Carmen appeared with fresh water glasses, her movements sharp and efficient. When she placed mine before me, her fingers brushed the table edge in what might have been an accidental tremor, or a deliberate signal that she knew exactly what was about to unfold. Caleb checked his watch with barely concealed anxiety. Whatever timeline they were working against was growing critically short. The loan shark's deadline was approaching, and their window for stealing my assets was closing rapidly. Well, he said with forced brightness that fooled no one, since you're feeling better, maybe we could continue our evening. I know Veronica was looking forward to more conversation about the restaurants. Absolutely. Veronica's smile could have powered the chandelier, but her eyes held the desperate gleam of someone watching their last hope disappear. We have so much catching up to do, so many plans to discuss. But something fundamental had shifted during my absence. Their desperation was showing through every crack in their performance, and I could sense the evening building toward a crescendo that would destroy all of us. Caleb stood suddenly and moved toward the liquor cabinet with predatory determination. Dad, let's have one more toast before the evening ends. Something special to commemorate this reunion. I watched him work, noting how his hands trembled almost imperceptibly as he measured scotch into fresh crystal tumblers. He lingered over my glass, adding extra liquid that caught the light differently than pure scotch, foreign particles swirling like guilty secrets in amber poison. You know, I began casually, I want to tell you about the day you were born, Caleb. His shoulders tensed noticeably. Dad, that's sweet, but maybe we should toast first. This scotch is too good to let it get warm. This is important, son. I settled back in my chair, hands folded peacefully while my heart hammered against my ribs. Your mother was in labor for 16 hours, longest day of my life. Emma leaned forward with forced enthusiasm, her panic barely contained. "Nathaniel, the scotch really will lose its flavor if we wait too long. Can't we drink and listen at the same time?" "Patience, dear. Some stories can't be rushed." I watched Caleb carry the glasses toward our table, noting the slight sediment swirling in mine when it caught the chandelier light. Where was I? Oh yes, Evelyn was convinced something was wrong because labor was taking so long. Caleb set my glass down carefully, ensuring I could see the generous portion he'd poured. His own glass contained significantly less, crystal clear without any unusual particles floating in the liquid. The doctor kept assuring us everything was normal. I continued, lifting my glass as if to examine the scotch's color. "But your mother had instincts about these things. She always knew when something wasn't quite right." "Fascinating," Veronica interrupted, her smile growing strained with each passing second. "But surely that toast is getting warm. Family stories are so much better with good scotch." I swirled my glass gently, watching foreign particles dance in the amber liquid like evidence of premeditated crime. GHB and Rohypnol, according to Carmen's anonymous warning, enough to make me compliant, suggestible, vulnerable to signing away everything Evelyn and I had built together over 4 decades of marriage. "You're absolutely right about savoring good scotch," I agreed, bringing the glass closer to my lips without drinking. "Evelyn always said patience makes everything taste better." Caleb's left eye twitched, another childhood tell when he was caught in lies. "Dad, you've been talking for 15 minutes. The scotch really is getting warm." "Time flies when you're sharing memories." I gestured expansively with my glass, using the motion to avoid actually drinking while appearing to participate in their toast. "Did I mention how tiny you were when you were born? Just 6 pounds, but you had the strongest grip I'd ever felt in such small fingers." Veronica stood abruptly and moved behind my chair, her hands settling on my shoulders with practiced intimacy that now felt like restraint rather than affection. "Nathaniel, you're such a wonderful storyteller," she said, her fingers pressing against my shoulders with increasing insistence. "Why don't we toast to Caleb's birth and then you can continue with all the beautiful memories?" I could feel her desperation through her touch, could sense how their perfect plan was falling apart with each passing minute of my refusal to drink the poisoned scotch. "Your mother said you'd be stubborn from day one," I continued, pretending not to notice Veronica's pressure. She was absolutely right, wasn't she? Once you set your mind on something, nothing could stop you from pursuing it. Caleb's composure cracked visibly. "Dad, please, just one sip. Then tell us about Mom's reaction when I was born." "The thing about stubbornness," I mused, still holding my untouched glass like Exhibit A in a criminal trial, "is that it can be a virtue or a vice, depending on how you choose to use it. Evelyn always worried about which path you'd ultimately choose." The room fell silent except for the soft sounds of Carmen washing dishes in the kitchen. Normal domestic activity providing a surreal soundtrack to this family destruction unfolding in real time. "I think," I said slowly, meeting Caleb's desperate eyes, "your mother would be absolutely heartbroken to see what choices you've made as an adult." Caleb's face went white as snow. "What do you mean by that, Dad?" Before I could answer, 3 sharp, authoritative knocks echoed from the front door like gunshots. "Police! Open the door immediately!" Caleb's glass slipped from his fingers, shattering against the marble floor as his face drained of all remaining color. The sound of breaking crystal seemed to break whatever spell had held this nightmare together. The metallic click of handcuffs cut through the dining room's stunned silence, like a judge's gavel delivering final verdict. Caleb stood frozen, his face the color of old parchment, as the senior detective stepped forward with the practiced authority of someone who'd dealt with family betrayals for 20 years. "Caleb Daniel Miller, you're under arrest for attempted poisoning, conspiracy to commit fraud, and elder abuse." The detective's voice carried the weight of absolute certainty. "You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law." "This is completely insane." Caleb's voice cracked like a teenager's, all his adult composure evaporating in the face of real consequences. "Officer, this is just a terrible misunderstanding. My father is confused, maybe having some kind of medical episode." "Dad, please." Veronica's hysteria built like a kettle reaching boiling point. "Tell them this is all some horrible mistake. Tell them we'd never hurt you." I stood slowly, the untouched glass of poisoned scotch still in my hand like a chalice of evidence. The sediment swirled like guilty secrets suspended in amber liquid, undeniable proof of calculated betrayal. "There's no mistake," I said quietly, my voice steady despite the emotional earthquake happening in my chest. "This glass contains GHB and Rohypnol. My son added them to make me compliant enough to sign business transfer documents." The junior officer accepted the glass with latex gloves, holding it up to the chandelier light where the foreign particles were clearly visible to everyone in the room. Undeniable evidence of premeditated crime. "Sir, attempted poisoning of a family member carries 8 to 15 years minimum sentence," the senior detective informed Caleb as the handcuffs clicked into place with finality. "Conspiracy and elder abuse add additional time to that." Caleb's knees buckled slightly as the reality of serious prison time hit him like a physical blow. 15 years? But the loan sharks, they'll kill me if I don't pay in 8 days. They threatened to break my legs first, then kill me if I still couldn't pay. Veronica's face drained of color as she realized her husband had just confessed to additional crimes in front of law enforcement. "Caleb, shut up. Don't say anything else without a lawyer present." But Caleb was beyond strategic thinking, beyond calculating his words for maximum legal protection. Desperation had stripped away all pretense and careful planning. "Dad, you don't understand," he pleaded, his voice breaking with genuine terror. "I owe $3.2 million to people who break bones for entertainment. I had no choice. They'll torture me before they kill me." "You had choices," I replied quietly, each word feeling like a nail in a coffin I'd built myself. "You chose gambling over family stability. You chose crime over honest work. You chose to poison your own father rather than face the consequences of your decisions like an adult." The officers exchanged glances that suggested they'd heard desperate justifications before, but attempted patricide for gambling debts registered as particularly disturbing, even by their professional standards. "Veronica Catherine Miller," the junior officer announced with official formality, "you're also under arrest as a co-conspirator in this attempted poisoning." "No!" Veronica's perfectly manicured fingernails clawed at the table edge like someone trying to prevent herself from drowning. "I didn't plan anything. Caleb forced me to help. I'm a victim here too." The senior detective's expression suggested he'd heard that exact defense roughly 1,000 times in his career. "Ma'am, evidence shows you researched the victim's food preferences, participated in the drugging plan, and helped create the perfect environment for this crime. That makes you an active participant, not a victim." As they led Caleb and Veronica toward the front door in handcuffs, Caleb turned back with eyes that held one last desperate attempt at emotional manipulation. "Dad, how could you do this to your own family? Mom would be absolutely heartbroken to see you destroy everything she believed in." "Your mother valued honesty above comfort," I answered firmly, drawing strength from Evelyn's memory. "She would never forgive what you tried to do tonight. She'd be proud that I chose justice over misguided family loyalty." Carmen appeared from the kitchen, her professional mask finally slipping to reveal satisfaction mixed with profound sadness. She'd witnessed justice served, but understood the human cost better than anyone. The complete destruction of family bonds that should have been sacred. The mansion fell silent except for the distant sounds of car doors slamming and engines starting. Blue and red police lights painted the expensive walls in colors of consequence as the vehicles disappeared into the night, carrying away the last remnants of my family. Standing alone in the dining room where my own son had tried to destroy me, I felt Evelyn's presence like a warm hand on my shoulder. She would have made the same impossible choice. She would have chosen protecting innocent people over protecting guilty family members. The expensive crystal lay shattered on marble floors, poisoned scotch spreading like spilled blood, physical evidence of how close I'd come to losing everything I'd worked 40 years to build. The Westchester County Police Station buzzed with late evening activity. Drunk driving arrests, domestic disturbances, and now my family's elaborate conspiracy case. Through reinforced glass windows, I could see Caleb and Veronica in separate holding cells, their designer clothes looking absurd against institutional gray walls and harsh fluorescent lighting. Caleb paced his small cell like a caged animal, stopping every few minutes to stare toward where I sat giving my formal statement. His expression cycled between fury and desperate pleading, the same emotional manipulation he'd tried as a child when caught in serious trouble. Mr. Miller, Detective Rodriguez set down his coffee with deliberate precision. Walk me through the anonymous warning again. How did you know what to look for in the scotch? Someone called my phone during dinner, I replied honestly. They warned me about the specific drugs and their effects, told me about the prepared legal documents. Without that warning, I would have signed away everything. Any idea who this person might have been? I thought about Carmen's nervous efficiency during dinner, her careful positioning to observe everything without seeming to watch, her deliberate non-reaction when I'd escaped through her kitchen. No concrete idea, I lied smoothly. But whoever it was saved my life and potentially protected other innocent people from similar schemes. Veronica's sobs echoed from the women's holding area, her hysteria cutting through the station's general chaos like a siren. This is all Caleb's fault, her voice carried clearly. I just went along because I was scared of what he'd do if I refused. Detective Rodriguez raised a skeptical eyebrow. Fear doesn't typically excuse active participation in conspiracy to commit elder abuse and fraud. We found the prepared legal documents in Mr. Caleb's home office. Power of attorney forms, business transfer papers, the whole package ready for your signature. How long will they serve, I asked, dreading the answer but needing to know. Attempted poisoning alone carries 8 to 15 years. Add conspiracy, elder abuse, and fraud. Caleb's looking at 20 to 25 years minimum. Veronica might get less if she cooperates and testifies against him, but she's still facing serious prison time. The numbers felt surreal. My son would spend his entire 40s behind bars because he couldn't accept responsibility for his gambling addiction, couldn't face his creditors like an adult, couldn't ask for help instead of resorting to attempted murder. The loan sharks he mentioned, Detective Rodriguez continued, consulting his notes. We'll need detailed information about those threats. Might help explain his desperation, though it won't excuse attempted murder of a family member. Through the window, I watched Caleb slump on his cell's narrow bench, head buried in his hands like a man realizing his life was effectively over. 25 years of my life raising him, teaching him right from wrong, building a legacy he could have inherited honorably, all destroyed by his refusal to face consequences like a responsible adult. Dad! His voice suddenly boomed through the station as he spotted me through the glass partition. Please, I'll pay it all back somehow. I'll go to gambling treatment. I'll change completely. The same empty promises he'd made during our last argument about money. The same emotional manipulation that had worked when he was younger and I was more naive about enabling destructive behavior patterns. Mr. Miller, Detective Rodriguez observed my son's outburst with professional detachment. He's going to keep trying to manipulate you emotionally. That's standard behavior pattern with family financial crimes. I know. The admission hurt more than I'd expected. His mother always said I was too lenient with him. Maybe if I'd been stronger earlier, set firmer boundaries. Not your fault, sir. Adult children make their own choices and bear responsibility for those choices. You can't control what other people decide to do, even family members. Veronica appeared at her cell window, makeup streaked down her cheeks like war paint, designer dress wrinkled beyond repair. Nathaniel, please talk to them. Tell them I was coerced. I never wanted to hurt you. Her desperation felt familiar, the same tone Caleb had used when caught in childhood lies, the same refusal to accept personal responsibility that had characterized both of their reactions tonight. Detective. I leaned forward, a sudden realization crystallizing. I need to ask you something important. The anonymous person who warned me, they risked everything to save a stranger. If I knew who they were, I'd want to help them in return. Understood completely. If they come forward voluntarily, we'll make sure their cooperation is noted favorably in our reports. The station's fluorescent lights hummed overhead, casting harsh shadows that revealed truth without flattery or forgiveness. My family's perfect facade had crumbled completely, exposing the desperate criminality underneath like rot in a beautiful piece of fruit. 3 hours later, with paperwork completed and formal statements recorded, I stood in the station lobby feeling emotionally hollowed out. An officer approached with car keys. "Ready to go home, Mr. Miller? We'll provide transportation back to Brooklyn." I pulled out my phone, staring at the number that had saved my life. Actually, I need to make one very important call first, to thank someone who deserves to know how this nightmare ended. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered, no longer disguised by fear but warm with genuine concern and barely concealed relief. "This is Carmen Gonzalez. How are you, Mr. Miller?" Carmen. Relief flooded through me like warm sunlight breaking through storm clouds. "You were there the whole time. You saw everything and still found the moral courage to save me." "I couldn't let them hurt you," she replied quietly. "You treated me with basic human kindness when your son and his wife treated me like invisible furniture. You said please and thank you, and actually looked at me when speaking, like I was a real person who mattered." Sitting in the police station lobby at nearly 1 in the morning, I found myself crying for the first time since Evelyn's funeral. Not from pain this time, but from overwhelming gratitude for this woman's moral courage in the face of personal risk. "Carmen, how did you know about the specific drugs, the legal documents, all the details?" 3 days ago, I was cleaning Mr. Caleb's office when I overheard them planning everything. They spoke as if I wasn't human, like I couldn't understand English or wouldn't matter if I did understand and disapproved. The casual cruelty struck me harder than the attempted poisoning itself. My son had become someone who dismissed human dignity based on job titles and immigration status. Someone who saw service workers as props rather than people. "They discussed everything openly," Carmen continued. "The drugs, how much to use, where to hide the legal papers, how to make you sign them. Miss Veronica researched your favorite foods, your business routines, everything needed to manipulate you successfully. You risked your job, possibly deportation, to warn a stranger." "Not a stranger." Her voice softened with emotion. "A good man who reminded me of my father. Someone who understood that treating people with respect costs nothing but means everything." The police officer gestured that my ride was ready, but this conversation mattered more than convenience or schedule. "Carmen, I need to ask you something important. Do you have another job lined up after tonight?" "No, sir. After tonight, I doubt I'll get references from the Millers. And without references..." Her voice trailed off, carrying the weight of uncertain future. "I own 6 restaurants in Brooklyn. I need a general manager for my newest location. Someone I can trust completely. Someone with unquestionable moral character and judgment." Silence stretched across the phone connection. When Carmen spoke again, her voice trembled with disbelief and hope. "Mr. Miller, you don't have to offer me anything. I didn't help you expecting reward. This isn't charity or payment for your help. I need employees who do the right thing when no one's watching, who choose conscience over convenience. You proved tonight that you're exactly that kind of person." I could hear her crying softly. "Sir, I don't know what to say. I've never managed anything before. The salary would be $70,000 to start, full health benefits, profit sharing after 1 year, plus all the job training and education you need to advance in restaurant management. Are you interested?" "Mr. Miller," Carmen's voice broke with emotion, "I don't know how to thank you. Say you'll start Monday morning at 10 a.m. at the Crown Heights location. I'll be there personally to train you and introduce you to the team." The police officer waited patiently while I completed arrangements with Carmen, address exchange, start date confirmation, promise of help with work visa requirements if needed. When I finally hung up, I felt lighter than I had in months, like something genuinely good had emerged from this nightmare. The ride back to Brooklyn passed in comfortable silence, streetlights illuminating familiar neighborhoods where honesty still mattered more than wealth, where people worked hard without expecting others to fund their mistakes through criminal activity. My modest brownstone welcomed me like an old friend. Inside, family photos still covered the refrigerator door. Caleb at various ages, Veronica at their wedding, Evelyn smiling from happier times when our family felt solid and real. I removed Caleb's photos carefully, not destroying them but placing them in a kitchen drawer. Some memories deserved preservation but not daily visibility, not constant reminders of how completely love could be perverted by desperation and greed. Veronica's wedding picture followed. The image of her laughing beside Caleb, both of them radiating joy and hope, felt like evidence from another lifetime. Before I knew what they were capable of doing to someone who loved them unconditionally. Evelyn's photo remained on the refrigerator, her smile seeming to approve of justice served and new friendships built on moral courage rather than family obligation. On my wall calendar, I wrote, Carmen, 10 a.m. Monday, in the space reserved for important appointments. Below that, I added new beginning in my careful handwriting. Outside, Brooklyn hummed with honest late-night activity. Night shift workers heading home, early shift workers starting their day, people who understood that integrity couldn't be purchased with borrowed money or stolen through family manipulation. Margaret would have loved Carmen's story. She'd always said, the best employees are those who do right things for right reasons regardless of personal cost or convenience. My phone buzzed with a final text from Detective Rodriguez. Both suspects formally charged, trials scheduled for August. Your testimony will be crucial for conviction. I turned off the lights and headed upstairs, finally ready to sleep peacefully for the first time in months. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. But tonight, justice had been served by good people making difficult choices in impossible circumstances. In my bedroom, Evelyn's perfume still sat on the dresser, a reminder that real love means protecting people from harm, even when that harm comes from family members, especially when it comes from family members who've lost their way completely. The moonlight streaming through our bedroom window fell across the empty space where Evelyn used to sleep, and for the first time since her death, that emptiness didn't feel like abandonment. It felt like possibility. Space for new relationships built on mutual respect rather than blood obligation. 6 months later, the spring morning sun streamed through the windows of my Crown Heights restaurant, illuminating Carmen as she reviewed the weekend's receipts with the focused attention of someone who understood that every dollar mattered. 6 months had transformed her from a nervous housekeeper into a confident manager who ran the restaurant with the same moral precision she'd shown that terrible night in Scarsdale. The Saturday lunch rush broke our weekly record again, she reported, her accent still present but her confidence entirely American now. And the new server you recommended is working out perfectly. I watched her work. The same careful attention to detail, the same respect for every employee regardless of their position, the same integrity that had saved my life and everything I'd built over 40 years of honest labor. Carmen, you've exceeded every expectation I had when I offered you this job. She looked up from the receipts, her smile genuine and warm. Mr. Miller, you gave me a chance when I had nothing. Of course, I'm going to give you my best effort every single day. The restaurant hummed with morning preparation sounds, coffee brewing, vegetables being chopped, the comfortable rhythm of honest work being done by people who respected each other. Everything Evelyn and I had dreamed of when we'd opened our first location decades ago. My phone rang, displaying a number I'd blocked and unblocked dozens of times over the past 6 months. Caleb, calling from prison. Carmen noticed my hesitation. The same number again? My son, calling from county jail while awaiting trial. You don't have to answer if you're not ready. But something about the morning light and the smell of fresh coffee and the sound of honest work being done made me feel strong enough to face whatever manipulation Caleb might try this time. Hello, Caleb. Dad. His voice sounded hollow, desperate in a way that was probably genuine for the first time in years. Thank you for taking my call. I wasn't sure you would. I almost didn't. Dad, I know I don't deserve to ask you for anything, but I need you to know something before the trial starts next month. I waited, giving him space to continue while preparing myself for another attempt at emotional manipulation. I've been going to AA meetings here, Gamblers Anonymous too. And I've been thinking about what I did to you, really thinking about it for the first time instead of just making excuses. Caleb, please let me finish. I need to say this. His voice cracked with what sounded like genuine remorse. I tried to poison my own father. I was willing to steal everything you and Mom built together. There's no excuse for that. No justification. No way to blame it on the gambling or the loan sharks or anything else. Carmen watched my face carefully, ready to support me however I needed. What do you want me to say, son? Nothing. I don't want you to say anything or do anything or forgive anything. I just want you to know that I understand what I did was unforgivable. And I want you to know that Carmen, the woman who saved you, she visits me sometimes. This surprised me completely. Carmen visits you? She comes once a month. She doesn't do it for me. She does it because she says someone needs to witness my accountability, to make sure I'm actually changing and not just saying words I think people want to hear. I looked at Carmen, who nodded quietly. I didn't mention it because I didn't want you to think I was overstepping boundaries, but someone needed to verify whether his remorse was real or just another manipulation. And what's your assessment? He's genuinely broken, she said simply. Genuinely ashamed. For the first time in his life, he's facing real consequences without anyone to enable him or make excuses for him. It's either going to destroy him completely or force him to become an actual adult. Through the phone, I could hear Caleb breathing, waiting for my response. Son, I hope you find your way to becoming the person your mother thought you could be. But that journey doesn't involve me anymore. You need to do this work for yourself, not to repair our relationship. I understand, Dad. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying to become someone worthy of the sacrifice Carmen made to save you from me. After I hung up, Carmen and I stood in comfortable silence, watching the morning preparation continue around us. Do you think he's really changing? I asked. People can change, Mr. Miller. But change requires genuine accountability, real consequences, and years of consistent choices. Prison might force him to confront who he became, but only he can decide who he wants to be when he gets out. The restaurant door chimed as our first customers of the day entered, a young couple with a baby, looking for somewhere quiet to have breakfast together. Carmen moved immediately to seat them at the best table by the window, the same attention to genuine hospitality that made this place feel like family to everyone who entered. Mr. Miller, she said, returning from seating the customers, I have something to tell you. Good news or bad news? Good news, I hope. The community college accepted my application for their business management program. Night classes so I can still work here during the day. Pride swelled in my chest like sunrise. Carmen, that's fantastic news. We'll adjust your schedule however you need to make it work. You've already given me so much. I don't want to ask for more accommodations. You saved my life and everything I'd worked for. Helping you build your future isn't accommodation. It's investment in someone who's proven their worth through moral courage. The morning sun climbed higher, filling the restaurant with golden light that made everything feel possible. Carmen returned to her receipts, but I could see her smiling as she worked. The same quiet satisfaction Evelyn used to show when she knew she was building something meaningful. My phone buzzed with a text from Detective Rodriguez. Caleb Miller pleaded guilty to all charges. Sentencing next Friday. Veronica Miller accepted plea deal, will serve 8 to 10 years. Justice served, finally and completely. My son would spend the next 20 years in prison and his wife would serve nearly a decade. The family I'd once known was gone forever, destroyed by greed and desperation and moral weakness. But looking around the restaurant, at Carmen managing with quiet competence, at employees who respected each other, at customers enjoying honest food prepared with care, I realized that family could be chosen as well as inherited. Carmen, I called across the dining room. Yes, Mr. Miller? Next month, I'm promoting you to general manager of all 6 locations. It's time for me to step back and let someone I trust completely take over the day-to-day operations. Her face lit up with a joy that made all the pain of the past 6 months feel worthwhile. Mr. Miller, I don't know what to say. Say you'll keep building on what Evelyn and I started. Say you'll treat people with the same dignity you showed when you risked everything to save a stranger. I promise, she said, and I knew she meant it the same way she'd meant it when she'd warned me about danger that terrible night. Outside, Brooklyn hummed with the energy of honest people doing honest work, building honest lives one choice at a time. Inside, the restaurant filled with the warmth of genuine community, not the fake perfection of Scarsdale mansions, but the real satisfaction that comes from treating people right and doing meaningful work. Evelyn's memory lived on in every corner of this place, in every kind interaction between employees and customers, in every decision to choose integrity over profit. And now Carmen's courage would help carry that legacy forward, proving that moral character could triumph over family betrayal, that chosen family could be stronger than blood family, that second chances were possible when they were earned through genuine transformation. The breakfast rush was beginning, customers streaming in for coffee and eggs and the comfort of being somewhere they were valued as human beings rather than sources of profit. Carmen moved between tables with the same grace she'd shown while serving dinner in that Scarsdale mansion, but now she was building something meaningful rather than enabling something destructive. Mr. Miller, she said, pausing beside my table with a fresh cup of coffee. Thank you for trusting me with your family's legacy. Thank you, I replied, for showing me that integrity still exists in a world that often rewards its absence. The morning light streamed through windows that Evelyn had helped me choose, illuminating a future that felt full of possibility rather than loss. My son was in prison where he belonged, but my chosen daughter was building something beautiful from the ashes of betrayal. Sometimes the family you create through shared values and mutual respect becomes stronger than the family you're born into. Sometimes moral courage from unexpected sources can save more than just your life. It can save your faith in human decency. As the restaurant filled with conversation and laughter and the sounds of honest community, I raised my coffee cup in a silent toast to Evelyn, to Carmen, to second chances earned through moral courage, and to the possibility that justice really could triumph over family loyalty when family loyalty had been corrupted beyond recognition. 3 years later. The courtroom was packed with reporters and curious observers as Caleb walked to the witness stand in handcuffs and prison uniform. 3 years of incarceration had changed him. Thinner, grayer, but somehow more solid, like someone who'd finally stopped running from his own reflection. He was testifying in the federal case against the loan sharks who'd been pressuring him, the same criminals who'd driven him to attempt poisoning his own father. His cooperation would reduce his sentence by 5 years, but more importantly, it would help put dangerous people in prison where they belonged. State your name for the record, the prosecutor requested. Caleb Daniel Miller. I'm currently serving 22 years for attempted poisoning, elder abuse, and conspiracy to commit fraud. Carmen sat beside me in the gallery, notebook in hand. She was completing her master's degree in business administration, while managing all 6 restaurant locations with the kind of quiet competence that made success look effortless. Mr. Miller, please tell the court how you first became involved with the defendants. For the next 2 hours, Caleb testified with unflinching honesty about his gambling addiction, his increasing desperation, the threats that had driven him to attempt murder. His voice never wavered, never made excuses, never tried to minimize his own responsibility for the choices he'd made. When he finished, the prosecutor asked, "Do you expect your testimony to repair your relationship with your father?" Caleb looked directly at me for the first time in 3 years. No, what I did was unforgivable. I don't deserve forgiveness, and I'm not asking for it. I'm testifying because these people are dangerous and someone needs to stop them before they destroy other families the way they helped destroy mine. After court, Carmen and I walked slowly toward the parking garage where our driver waited. One of her innovations, hiring a service to transport restaurant managers safely during evening hours. "How do you feel?" she asked. Proud of him finally. It took prison and 3 years of accountability, but he's become the man his mother always believed he could be. Too late for our relationship, but not too late for his soul. That's very generous of you. It's honest. People can change, but change doesn't erase consequences. He'll spend the next 17 years in prison, but at least he'll spend them as someone with integrity. The evening was warm, spring giving way to summer, the city alive with energy and possibility. Carmen's business degree would be complete in 6 months, and she'd already been accepted to law school with plans to specialize in immigration and workers' rights. "Mr. Miller," she said as we reached the car, "I have something to tell you." Good news or concerning news? Both, maybe. I've been offered a full scholarship to Columbia Law School. Pride and loss warred in my chest. Carmen, that's incredible. You absolutely have to accept. It would mean reducing my hours at the restaurant significantly. The restaurants will survive. Your future is more important than my convenience. She smiled with the quiet satisfaction of someone who'd built her life on moral courage rather than easy choices. I was hoping you'd say that. I want to become the kind of lawyer who protects people like we were that night. Families targeted by predators, immigrants threatened by exploitation, workers who need someone to fight for their dignity. As we drove through Brooklyn neighborhoods where honest people lived honest lives, I realized that Carmen's courage that terrible night in Scarsdale had created ripples that would continue spreading for decades. She'd saved my restaurants, but more importantly, she'd saved her own future and would eventually save countless others through the law career she was building. "Carmen," I said as we pulled up to her apartment building, "Evelyn would have loved you. She always said the measure of a life wasn't wealth or success, but how many people you helped along the way. She sounds like she was a remarkable woman. She was, and so are you." That night, I sat in my Brooklyn brownstone with a cup of tea and Evelyn's photo, thinking about the strange journey that had led from attempted murder to chosen family, from betrayal to renewal, from broken trust to relationships built on something more solid than blood, relationships built on shared values and mutual respect, and the kind of moral courage that could save lives and souls alike. My biological family had been destroyed by greed and desperation, but my chosen family, built around a restaurant kitchen where people treated each other with dignity, had become something beautiful and lasting. Sometimes the worst things that happen to us create space for the best things we never could have imagined. Sometimes family betrayal opens doors to family loyalty we never knew existed. Sometimes courage from unexpected sources can transform not just our circumstances but our understanding of what family really means. The restaurants continued thriving under Carmen's management, but more importantly, they continued serving as places where people of all backgrounds could find respect, opportunity, and the kind of community that makes life worth living. Caleb would complete his sentence as someone who'd finally learned the difference between accountability and excuses. Veronica would serve her time and hopefully emerge as someone capable of honest relationships rather than manipulative ones. And Carmen would become a lawyer who protected vulnerable people, using the same moral courage that had saved a lonely widower from his own son's desperate scheme. Justice served, second chances earned, chosen family proving stronger than blood family, and the enduring truth that integrity, however costly in the short term, always pays dividends in the long term for those brave enough to choose it consistently. If this story taught you anything about the importance of moral courage, about the difference between blood family and chosen family, about the possibility of redemption even in the darkest circumstances, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. Your support helps me continue sharing these difficult but important stories about the choices that define us as human beings. And remember, when someone shows you who they really are through their actions, believe them. When someone risks everything to protect you from danger, treasure them. And when you have the chance to choose between easy and right, always choose right, even when it costs everything you thought you wanted. Family isn't just about shared blood. It's about shared values, mutual respect, and the courage to do the right thing, even when doing the right thing destroys everything you thought you knew about the people you love. Thank you for listening to the most difficult chapter of my life. Thank you for understanding why sometimes protecting yourself means destroying relationships you thought would last forever. And thank you for believing that even when families fall apart through betrayal, new families can be built through moral courage and genuine respect for human dignity.